who shut the mouths of lions, verse 34, quenched the fury of the flames and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. And it goes on and on and on. And then in verse 39 it says, all of these were commended for their faith, yet none of them received what was promised. And I think that is the key there. That James is urging us in verse 10, look to the example of the prophets. Look to the example of others who in their trials have done well at standing firm in the Lord, who have done the waiting well. And so we can obviously look at examples from the prophets, from the scriptures, but I think that we can look at examples among ourselves too. I know so often I have been encouraged when I find that some other person who is maybe in a similar type trial that I am, or maybe even a harder trial, but I've seen how in the moment, even though they might not know yet what is to come, they hadn't yet received the promise, but they have waited well. They have trusted the Lord in it. So, we can learn how to practice waiting by persevering through present waiting and seeing the example of how other people do that well. And then the third thing that we can see about waiting is learning from past waiting. And this is what verse 11 has to speak about. Verse 11 says, and you have seen what the Lord finally brought about. And then it goes on to speak about Job. But just think for a second about those words. You have seen what the Lord finally brought about. How often is it in our current trial or suffering or whatever our situation, hard though it might be, we can't see what the end result is going to be, right? Because we are in it. We're smack dab in the darkness or the despair, the depression, the loneliness, or whatever the situation is bringing. But we can see, like verse 11 is talking about from the example of Job, we see chapter 1 of verse Job, and we see chapter 42 of verse Job, and we can stand on the other side of chapter 42 and see, oh, that's why all of those things happen in chapter 2 and 13 and 14 and 27 and 37, or where we can see it because we're standing on the other side of it now, and I think that's a lesson that we can learn from Job. Job, as it says in your book, these are the things that happened to him in the very beginning, that his oxen and his donkeys died, that all of his servants were killed, that the camels were stolen, that the sheep were burned from the lightning, and that his sons and his daughters were killed. But then we stand in chapter 42, and this is what we learn, that he regained 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoked oxen, 1,000 donkeys, 7 sons, 7 daughters, and he lived for 140 years, and he saw his descendants grow. That's incredible, but we only see it because we're standing again at the other side of chapter 42 of Job. So how can we find encouragement from this in our trial that we are currently experiencing today? Learning from past waiting encourages us in our trial today. I can think of so many situations in my life where I never thought I would feel better, I'd get out of this depression, this relationship would no longer haunt me anymore, etc. When I felt like this won't really ever end, I'm always going to feel like this. And I can confidently say in so many of these situations, I look back on it, and it's a hump that I have totally jumped over, and I'm like leaps and bounds away from that hump now, and it doesn't even impact me anymore. But this is the Lord's perspective, that He kind of stands back in care and compassion and mercy, as our verse talks about in 11. But He can see the whole situation, and there's meaning in some of our waiting periods, even though it's hard and it's tough. So as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, okay, how does this passage personally impact me? And that's what I've really been praying, that this wouldn't just be something that I am teaching and preparing for others, but that this would be a passage that would really speak to me. And so I have a situation where I am still waiting. For 3.5 years now, I've had really intense stomach pain, and this started on a mission trip that I took some college students on from our church to Malaysia. We had a great trip. We're able to serve with a local missionary couple, the Woodrings, that we supported here for many years, and we were working with prostitute community and giving roses to the women and showing them how much God loves them. And we were in the village setting, and we were able to encourage some of the local churches that were there and the pastors and pray over them. There was also a lot of children that had been taken off the streets and were orphans now, and we were able to joining a ministry with giving them some food and something to drink and sharing them the love of Jesus and the care that he has for them. Amazing trip. I get home, and all of a sudden I just have a lot of stomach pain and not kind of really understanding why. And this goes on for a couple months, and I just think, I guess I don't think much about it. I'm just like, I'm sure it'll go away. But then December hits, so we got back in around August. December hits, and I am just in excruciating pain. Actually, I was supposed to come here in Life Builders on a Sunday morning and share about the Malaysia trip with my team. But that morning, I was just so sick that I couldn't come. My mom ended up coming and rushing me to the emergency. And they did all these tests, and that kind of began of what now has been the last 3.5 years. And I've been through tremendous amounts of testings and different doctors. I mean, all over the place. If you suggested, I've probably already gone through it, from kind of the Western doctor perspective in Kaiser and things like that to the more like homeopathic and naturalist, trying to do different diets. Anyways, you kind of get the idea. But every time I go to the doctors, they just keep saying, we don't know what's wrong, we don't know what's wrong, we don't know what's wrong. And as you can imagine, it's super frustrating and not knowing. And this has definitely prevented me from doing a lot of things. I think I've more become used to the pain level now, and I think it's truly the Lord's grace and strength over me. But over the last couple of years, there's been tons of college life things that I haven't been able to do, and mission trips that I was supposed to go on, and then the last minute wasn't able to, things like this that have made life very difficult. But this has been my waiting phase, and for me, I don't know what the end is going to be. I don't know if the Lord is going to bring healing this side of heaven, or if my experience in full restorative healing is going to be when I see him face to face. Kind of the next step in the journey happened when I was in Kenya this summer, and I was able to see some Kenyan doctors, a parasitologist and a tropical disease specialist, and they kind of ran a ton of different gamut of different tests on me, and they think they discovered possibly what's wrong. And I have some friends that are over in Kenya right now that are picking up a second round of prescriptions, and they'll be back in a week and a half, and maybe that will work. That could be the answer. But again, I don't know. But the Lord has taught me so much through this experience. I've learned to depend upon him in ways that I didn't even know I could. And the whole idea of him being my daily bread and my living water has meant so much more when daily bread and living water really almost feels toxic to me at times. I've learned to depend upon the body of believers. I feel like oftentimes I kind of want to be independent and be able to do things on my own, but you can't, sometimes when you're in a lot of pain. And I've also learned that the Lord is the true one that leads the college life ministry and the things that I'm involved in. I'm not the one who runs the show. He is. And so if there's something that I can't go to, then he is sovereign over that, and he will take control over that. So the two things that I have learned, and I put this at the end of your page, these are kind of the two things that the Lord keeps rehearsing with me. I don't know all the answers, but I do know the answer giver. And that has brought such comfort to me. I can't always pinpoint kind of what's going on or why the doctors seemingly have 1,000 different opinions depending on who I go to. But I do know the answer giver. I know the one who is sovereign and control over that. And I know whose hands my life is in, and I can trust him immensely because of that. And the second thing the Lord has really rehearsed over and over again with me is I'm not waiting on the circumstance to change, but I'm waiting on the Lord who is changeless. And that's been the whole point that we've been doing the attribute board, is that in our trials and in our suffering, sometimes it's hard to forget that all these things are true about God. And these are just 48 things that we learn from James alone. That's one book of the Bible out of 66. There's 65 other books to learn from what is true about our God. And sometimes we just need to stand upon the firm truth that this is who he is, and he does not change. We learned earlier in James that he doesn't change like shifting shadows, right? And that's really true. All these things that are about him, he doesn't change. So even though my circumstances, I might be looking for them to change, I would love it if the pain would be lifted from me. But where I do take great comfort is that the Lord does not change, that he is changeless. And I can really take heed from all three of these lessons about waiting. The first one about placing hope in the future, about placing hope that he is coming. And I told you earlier that the future holds a promise that my body will not always be this way.